Hello everyone, welcome to WatchMojo.com. Today we're counting down the top 20 strongest characters in Genshin Impact. That's right, this time it's the actual 20 strongest characters in the game. Okay, this list was created on stream a few days ago, and the criteria I used is this. We're comparing C6 R5 4 stars with any weapon, it doesn't really matter, and C0 5 stars. Now, feel free to roast that in the comments for, I guess, allegedly being unfair. I'm sure someone's going to say that. But on this list, I weigh equally both how useful a character is in precisely what they do, i.e. what their strength is. It's not just DPS, but for utility characters, we're going to be focusing on their utility instead. You know, that kind of thing. So healers, very strong if they're good at healing. And of course, how flexible that character is, i.e. can you only play them in like a couple of teams, or can you play them in a lot of teams? Now, as of recording, we are about to head into the 5.2 announcement livestream tomorrow, so I haven't included anyone from Chuska and Ororon onwards, so no Mafuika. But obviously, we don't know anything about Mafuika's kit yet. Hell, we don't even have leaks for Mafuika's kit, so obviously there's no point in me trying to speculate that. Also, I have a couple of honourable mentions that I also will mention a little bit later on, and why they didn't end up on the list. Oh, and we're not going to be spoiling major story plots. Now, before we begin, don't forget to subscribe. Did you know that 91.5% of y'all haven't subscribed yet, so maybe you should go and do that. Also, I swear some of my videos get randomly suppressed by the algorithm, which I know it's unbelievably cringe. So I think subscribing and ringing the bell is probably the best way to counteract that. So if you could do that for me, that would be amazing. Alright, enough yapping. Grab a seat. Let's get into it. Sumeru stands out as a niche but powerful support for overvape and overload teams. Now, before you get C6, she brings a unique set of buffs, providing an attack increase based on her HP and healing for the on-field character, as well as reducing enemy pyro and electro resistance. And at C6, she further strengthens her niche by boosting team healing and adding pyro and electro damage buffs to the on-field character. Whilst her abilities make her an essential support in very specific teams, her narrow focus on mainly those overload setups does end up keeping her at number 20. Nilou's kit transforms the Bloom reaction into a high damage AoE effect. When using teams with only Hydro and Dendro characters, her Bloom cores explode almost immediately, with their damage scaling off her HP. Now, this setup enables Nilou to create massive AoE damage, making her teams some of the best at handling large groups of enemies. However, Nilou's reliance on this specific team composition, especially against C0, is why she ranks lower at number 19. Navia is a very powerful Geo-Burst, not ultimate, but just big damage numbers, DPS character with a shotgun umbrella. Not only does she actually make Crystallize somewhat useful for a change by converting them into her shotgun pellets, but she also has some of the highest skill damage scaling in the game. With a skill that has 2 charges at the start, Navia's damage output during her rotations tends to be quite formidable. And because she's a Geo character, and she's also a Claymore user, she's better equipped to break Geo shields, which we're actually starting to see a bit more of. For all of that, Navia finds herself on the list at number 18. Molani is our first Natlan character on the list. Now, in combat, Molani is famous for having massive burst damage from her Sharky Bites, especially at full power, and of course her ult. Now, apparently in the speedrunning community, Molani is often considered one of the fastest characters in the game, and this is all due to Molani's kit being designed almost specifically for forward vaporized gameplay, where the reaction itself has the highest reaction multiplier in the game. The massive damage output that Molani has is what secures her place on the list, but because she tends to only be played in forward vape teams with particularly good reason, Molani finds herself at number 17. Alhaitham is a powerful spread DPS character. Now, generally, this is due to him being able to do a lot of Dendro attacks throughout his rotation, which in turn means a lot of spread reactions. He is also very capable at handling both AoE and single target gameplay, which is what earns him a spot on this list over some other Dendro characters. For me personally, I often have a hard time gauging just how powerful he really is without resorting to a spread and impact. So sometimes he doesn't feel powerful, even though he is in fact very, very strong. But at the end of the day, I think 99% of the time Alhaitham is being played in a singular quick bloom team. So whilst you can just as easily play him in other teams, he does seem kinda pseudo-niche, which is why Alhaitham finds himself at number 16. Oz is a very strong off-field electro DPS character. Now, one of his strengths happens to lie in his master, Fischl's passive, Undone Be Thy Simple Hex, where upon an electro reaction occurring, an additional Thunderbolt is released upon the target, with a 1-second cooldown. Now, because this additional Thunderbolt doesn't have an internal cooldown on reactions, it can always react with whatever aura is on the target, which is particularly potent in Quicken teams. This already makes Fischl a very strong character in aggravate gameplay, but on top of that she has her C6, where normal attacks from the on-fielder cause Oz to fire an additional attack. There are some characters, namely Clorant, who can turn Oz into a machine gun turret with devastating effects. All of this is why Fischl finds herself at number 15. Xiangling is an animo character whose kit revolves around turning anyone and everyone into a plunge DPS character. And plunge DPS can be very strong for a couple of reasons. First off, most if not all plunge attacks do not have a reaction internal cooldown. So if you were to pick a pyro character, for example the Luke or the Tao, and you were to enable them to be able to plunge on enemies with, let's say, Hydro Auras, you can do a lot of very powerful reverse vaporize reactions that multiply the damage with outstanding results. Furthermore, Xiangling is a team healer with her ult, which enables her to be one of the premier healers in content where you may find yourself in danger, or if you're playing with someone like Furina. Whilst Xiangling is technically an extremely niche character, the thing is, her niche is basically with everyone, possibly excluding archers. So coupling that with just how strong everything she does is exactly how Xiangling finds herself at number 14. Yaimiko's turret-based kit makes her a top-tier off-field electro DPS. Now, her turrets deal consistent electro damage without relying on specific triggers, which is something that Fischl has to deal with. This is why Yaimiko is a little bit higher on the list, because she can actually fit seamlessly into many team compositions. Furthermore, her ult does significant AoE damage, so Miko finds herself being really strong in spread teams with characters like Signati, or overload teams with someone like the Hire. Miko's reliability and her versatility in various setups is precisely why she's above Fischl, thus securing her spot at number 13. Baizhu is by my estimation the strongest healer in the game in terms of healing, and this is due to him being able to quickly heal his entire team through his skill alone, plus additional healing and a mini shield via his ultimate. Now, what's also particularly useful about Baizhu is that he's a Dendro character with some Dendro application via his ultimate, meaning he can quite easily enable a lot of Dendro teams, particularly ones in need of some or actually significant healing. This effectively makes him incredibly versatile, which, coupled with his healing versatility, is precisely why Baizhu finds himself at number 12. The Raiden Shogun, or as I like to call her A, serves as a powerful electro DPS and team battery. Her skill provides buffs to her allies' ult damage and also strengthens the great Bulba sword with resolve stacks that build as her teammates use their abilities. This results in a high damage ult that subsequently also recharges her team, making A ideal for energy-hungry comps. While she shines as a main DPS, her utility as an energy provider is basically unmatched, thus securing her spot at number 11. And of course, there's also some heretics who even use red Hyper Bloom teams, but we don't talk about that. Xiangling is a very powerful off-field pyro DPS. Now, the main reason why Xiangling is very strong is because of her Pyronado, which does not have a reaction internal cooldown. This means in gameplay against enemies with Hydro Auras, Pyronado can always trigger Vaporized reactions, which further multiply her damage. Xiangling is also a character who can take advantage of damage snapshotting in the game, where if you pair her with an attack buffer, like let's say Fischl Sarah, Xiangling's Pyronado, with a 10-second cooldown, can continue to do the same amount of damage even if Sarah's buff has already expired after 6 seconds. Pyronado's lack of reaction internal cooldown and the addition of Warba also makes Xiangling a potent option for setting up Pyro Auras to be reacted on by other elements, namely Cryo and Hydro. This, along with somehow every spear in the game being a spear that can be used by Xiangling in some meaningful capacity, is what makes Xiangling one of the strongest and most versatile characters in the game. However, there is a reason why she only finds herself at number 10, and it's because of her one singular flaw: her energy requirements. Because in order for her ultimate to return in a timely manner, you either need to build some ludicrously high energy recharge, i.e. 300%, or you play her with notable batteries like A or Chevrus. This is why Xiangling's position on the list has dropped down to only number 10. Xingqiu is a very strong off-field Hydro character. Now, he is best known for being able to apply a lot of Hydro onto enemies, ensuring essentially that they have a Hydro aura ready for reactions. For example, Vaporize with Pyro characters. Now, on top of that, Xingqiu can provide some defensive support, in particular resistance to interruption, which makes it harder for enemies to knock you around. But while he is essentially a DPS character, I feel like most people tend to focus on Xingqiu's Hydro application. But either way, Xingqiu is a very strong utility character who finds himself on the list at number 9. Yelan is another very powerful off-field Hydro character. Now, her kit is very similar to Xingqiu with some noticeable differences. Yelan focuses more on damage instead, with her off-field Hydro attacks typically doing more damage, and she also has a passive that gives the on-field an additional damage buff. I suppose at the end of the day, you can play Yelan and Xingqiu in pretty much the same teams, sometimes together in fact. It really is because she tends to do more damage than Xingqiu that Yelan finds herself at a slightly higher position of number 7. Arlecchino is a very strong Pyro on-field DPS character. Her kit revolves around her Pyro-infused normal attacks being significantly buffed by the Bond of Life mechanic, which she can produce and use as an extra resource. This typically results in very hard-hitting normal attacks at the start of her rotations, especially in Vaporized gameplay. Now, Arlecchino also has quite a few team compositions where she can be very powerful in, including, but not limited to, Vaporized teams, Mono teams, and Overload teams, all of which she shines brightly in. Now, her damage overall, plus the general ease of playing her, is why Arlecchino finds herself at number 6. Nahida is a premier Dendro DPS and enabler. Her skill tags multiple enemies, linking them together so that Dendro reactions can trigger across all of them with no internal cooldown. Her versatility shines in any Dendro team, be it a Quicken or Bloom-based Dendro team, of course, with her ult also enhancing elemental mastery for the on-field character, amplifying reaction damage. Her combination of powerful Dendro application, flexibility, and supportive buffs makes her one of the top Dendro characters, securing her at number 5. Neuvillette is a very powerful on-field Hydro DPS character. His kit revolves around doing a lot of sustained Hydro damage through his charge attack Hydro Blast. What makes Neuvillette particularly strong is that he can also freely manipulate his HP to go both up and down, which enables him to easily use the Marechaussee Hunter artifact set, and it essentially causes him to be a naturally tanky character. That being said, generally speaking, there's really only one, maybe two, possibly 3 teams that Neuvillette plays in, and they're all effectively Neuvillette teams. This is why, despite his massive damage output causing him to be very high on the list, Neuvillette does find himself at number 4. Now, Before we get into the top 3, I just wanted to go quickly through the honourable mentions that I previously mentioned and why I decided they would probably not make the list, despite the fact that they are in fact very, very strong. So, the first one's going to be Clorand. Now, ultimately, I just feel like she's not as strong as A, and she's not as versatile as Miko. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you severely disagree with that. But the one thing that Clorand has over both these characters is that she's definitely still the most fun to play character in the game, for sure. Tignari is another honorable mention because he's ludicrously strong in single target combat, i.e. against bosses, and I feel like he's perfectly fine at AoE as well, but I guess at the end of the day, Alhaitham just ends up being a bit stronger overall, apparently, and that may possibly have something to do with Tignari's cooldowns being, I mean, sometimes they're a little bit on like the long side, at least in my experience. I also want to mention Sucrose because on paper she's about as strong as some of the top 3 characters, but let's be real here, she's a bit way too clunky in the way to play her, and her ultimate, especially if you're trying to utilize that C6, just seems to refuse to infuse with an element half the time, let alone the correct element that you actually want, which effectively makes it just way too unreliable. I also want to mention Zhongli. Now, Zhongli is incredibly versatile in that you can basically slot him in almost any team, because his Great Big Shield as well as his Universal Enemy Resistance Shred is very, very good. Although he's kind of being power crept by one of the top 3. And also the other thing, which kind of made me not want to include him on the list, is the fact that these days, shields, I feel like are starting to lose a little bit of their value, because there's just a lot of enemies that do so much damage that shields break. And whilst shields breaking is cool because you've basically just tanked a whole lot of damage, you effectively lose all of its effectiveness when it breaks. To me, I feel like if you're going to play Zhongli, I kind of like the higher a little bit more these days. That's just my personal preference right there. And finally, I want to talk about Wriothesley. So, Wriothesley is ultimately a very strong cryo DPS. Apparently, he is the strongest cryo DPS, according to some people. But I feel like at the end of the day, cryo right now is just not a particularly strong element. I mean, yeah, I'm an Aloy main, that's cool and all, but I'm not really an Aloy main because she's cryo, I'm just an Aloy main because she's Aloy. So that's a little bit irrelevant. The point is, Wriothesley, despite being a very strong DPS, I just feel like it's not as strong as a lot of the characters on the list because cryo is just in a bit of a weird spot right now. That's basically it. Gaedahara Kazuha is a very strong Anemo support character. His kit revolves around using the swirl reaction to shred enemy resistances to the element swirled by using the Violet's Venerate artifact set, aka VV, and provide his team with damage bonuses to the element swirls. Kazuha can also vacuum small enemies together, which can be very useful for allies that partake in AoE damage. And in a similar fashion, Kazuha still remains as the most effective way to manipulate the position of certain items, for example, Aloy's bomblets, which makes him one of the most useful allies for her to secure an ice rush. The damage buffs make him one of the most versatile characters in the game, and because of this, Kazuha finds himself at number 3. Xilonen is a very powerful Geode support or DPS character. Her kit is similar to Kazuha's in that she uses the Crystallize reaction to provide her team with damage bonuses to the elements she crystallizes, using the Scroll of the Hero of the Cinder City artifact set, also known as Scroll, whereas her skill either unconditionally shreds enemy resistance to elements based on the characters on her team, or they allow her to kick enemies with her rollerblades. The main reason why Xilonen ends up on this spot in the list is of course going to be her supportive capabilities, which we'll focus on. But her DPS side isn't actually that half bad, because if it were that alone, I would have placed Kazuha above Xilonen. But what makes Xilonen even stronger is that she heals. Single target healing at C0, but evidently she can heal a lot, even enough for Furina teams. At the end of the day, there are some teams that can use Kazuha's grouping abilities, but essentially almost every team will want healing at some point. Because of that, and the fact that it's easier to play her than Kazuha, this is why Xilonen finds herself at number 2. Furina is a very powerful Hydro off-field DPS and support character. There's a lot of things that Furina does. The main things are that her skill, the Salon Solitaire, provide unconditional Hydro application and damage whilst sapping her team's HP, and her ultimate gives her team a damage buff based on how much HP the team has lost or healed up. And look, whilst the HP sapping for her skill does often mean her teams would want a healer, preferably a team healer, to keep everyone mostly alive, it also pretty much enables any on-fielder to run the Marashose Hunter artifact set, which means that pretty much any on-fielder in a Furina team becomes that much easier to build because the artifact set bonuses include 36% crit rate that you don't need to farm for, thus allowing you to focus on other stats for your character's build. On top of that, Furina's damage buffs through her ult affecting the team is why she's above Yelan, with her unconditional Hydro damage and application actually being the reason why she's also above Xilonen and Kazuha, in that she has the versatility of being significantly potent in some Dendro teams as well, namely Hyper, Quick Bloom, and Virgin. This is a character who can actually do a lot of damage, especially with Clabaleta, whilst providing the team with very significant buffs, and is the most versatile character in the game. Because of that, Furina finds herself at the top of the list at number 1. So these are the top 20 strongest characters in Genshin Impact as I understand it. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. Who do you think could have deserved a better spot in that particular list? Let me know in the comments, who would you take out of the list? That's always another interesting question. It's going to be interesting to see how Marvel Week will change everything, potentially. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Game's up. Fun's over. Let the world